Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the inaugural first edition ever of the Reaction Time podcast. I am David Naylor, aka Prof. Cedar. Some of you may have seen me on the internet in other places doing other podcasts and other things. I am joined for this podcast by two of my very best friends, Eric and Steven, who you can see on the video before you if you're watching our video edition. And we're here to talk about League of Legends, because this is a thing that we do and have done for many, many years at this point. Like, many years. And we decided it would be a fun thing to record us talking about it and see if people wanted to listen to it. So, Steven, talk first. How are you feeling?
Oh, I'm ready to go. I think by many years you mean at least a decade. As long as anyone can be.
I have only known you since 2012, so it's not quite a decade, but it's close.
I've been playing since 2010. So when did you start playing?
But I haven't been talking to you about it since 2010. That's the difference.
Fine. That's
and Eric, are you ready to podcast?
I'm feeling ready to podcast. We'll see if the podcasting is ready for me.
I don't think the podcast is ready to handle your
probably
take.
not.
Bring the hot fire. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
So we're going to start. It is, of course, in the League of Legends esports community Worlds season. We are recording this on Thursday nights, the 17th of September right now. So the first games of Worlds are a little more than exactly 7 days away. They start we're recording in Central Time in the U.S., 3 a.m. on Friday morning, the 25th of September. So in the spirit of that, we've got a lot of Worlds conversation to have. We're going to start with some power rankings, because who doesn't love power rankings? So Eric put together a tier list for each role of players that are included in the group stage and the other teams from the major four regions for the most part. We didn't go deep into the play-in regions very much, unfortunately, because we have jobs and real lives and can't quite do that.
Ooh.
But we've got a tier list to discuss, and I think it best that we start from the top, because what better place to start than from the top lane?
He did
so,
He did the joke.
Eric, I will tee you up with this. You have 3 top laners in your S tier at Worlds: Zoom, Nuguri, and Wunder. It is the smallest S tier of all 5 roles.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Partially because I felt it was more clear cut than the other roles for S tier besides mid lane, which we'll get to later. Largely because Nuguri and Wunder are the 2 in the S tier list that are very specific, and the main reason they're up this high is because both of them are the top laners I've seen in the major regions that have had the ability to completely dominate their lane and then from top lane carry a game in a more carry capacity, more than any of the other top laners that are at this tournament. Wunder's performance, specifically with Nico in the playoff stage, was really disgusting. I kind of wonder if everyone completely forgot how the champion works, like between the last time he played it and now, because Bwipo had a really bad time, and Nuguri also seems to have leveled up from even last year, which is pretty impressive. It could just be because of his team around him also is leveled up. But both of them really have the solo capacity to impact the full map from top lane, which has felt really, really rare with how things have been going right now, as assuming teams haven't been playing Shen or whatever. And then on the flip side, there's Zoom, who actually feels like the top laner who has the best team fighting mechanics, and then also doesn't int. Because a number of the other top laners at this tournament have a huge capacity to just run it down, especially when they get behind in games.
Excluding Nuguri and Wunder, to be
not
clear.
Excluding Nuguri and Wunder. And so Zoom is the one top laner who I feel can actually win lane the majority of the time and shows up for team fights and can maybe even be behind in the game and them still win. So those were why those 3 ended up in my S tier. Was because of just overall their performance and game impact is, in my opinion, like stronger than like what I had in the A tier, and definitely stronger than like the pack of top laners, which have most of which haven't looked very impressive, partially due to the meta, which hasn't really been about like carrying performances from the top side of the map. Has been more about assuming control of Dragon, rotating up for Rift Herald with like everybody on your team, rotating back down for Dragon, and then hopefully winning the game by 20 minutes. So like it feels like top lane is kind of the odd one out in a lot of the games right now. Even in LPL for the most part, although like the top lane Renekton in LPL is like somehow light years better than top lane Renekton in every other region in the entire world.
Only because Solo didn't make it. Big Solo
Steven,
Crocodile, we're not worried.
in Eric's A tier, he has 369, Bin, and Rascal. Do you think his complete exclusion of North American top laners from the S tier and A tier is justified?
Yeah, just based off of meta. And I think the big thing that you mentioned is like, unless everyone is practicing Shen, which I know like North America can't do. It doesn't matter. We do not have the like ability to shot call and make decisions in the early game to where we can properly utilize cross map play. We just don't. And like the best maybe and is like Impact with Gangplank. They're not going to let him have Gangplank because who would? And that's still like he's not going to be able to rotate for early objectives. He's just going to be able to throw ult and hopefully like do well in lane. He ints right at the beginning of every game. So he's not going to be ahead on Gangplank, and like his Shen is it was good. Like, doesn't he have a skin? No, he has a Jack skin. That was he didn't get.
It's a Jack skin.
It's Jack skin,
which should be decent right now. Like LPL teams have been playing a lot of Jacks. Impact's Jacks since they styled. Wait, he wasn't even on SKT when they styled with skins at that MSI tournament,
No.
right? That wasn't even Impact anymore.
No,
yeah,
I don't
never
believe so.
mind. Yeah, so Impact's like really hasn't even played Jax competitively like since the SKT games. His like pocket picks recently have been Gnar and like Singed that have shown up, and Singed would be hilarious, but I don't think it's really good in this like team fight around Dragon meta.
No, unless it like specifically counters like if he, I guess you could take it against Shen and just like shove Shen in and flip him out of responding to fights. And like, I just don't see Jat putting him on anything like that. He's good. Like he's gonna rock Ornn, he's gonna rock Shen, and he's gonna rock Gangplank. He's not gonna do well on Shen. He's not gonna beat anyone on Gangplank. If anything, he's just gonna like turtle up and win late game, or get
I think your saltiness could be showing just a bit.
Just a little bit.
You have to remember like how Worlds buff Impact works, like, and where he has consistently looked like the best player out of like the North American region in Worlds events for like the past few years now, like hard carrying C9 out of a few group stages, because randomly at Worlds he shows up and looks like 5 times better than he looked in the regular season. And so I wouldn't rule him out because of that. I think that but I definitely do feel what you're saying about not including him in my A tier, especially if you look at like 369 or like even kind of Rascal in this tier of play. Like it just seems very unlikely
because they're performing now. Like when you're building a tier list, like you can hope and you can look at like yes, like Worlds buffs or like international play buffs, like those will come into play, right? Yeah, totally. But if you weigh in on that, then it's not going to fucking happen. And like Impact has not shown up. He hasn't.
Let the public record show that Impact hasn't played a competitive game on Jax since All-Star 2014.
Yeah. If you bust it out, it's for a meme. It's when they're about to like not make it through play-ins, and he's gonna bust it out and like hard carry just to shut me the fuck up. And
Now, it should be noted, you did not mention the Mordekaiser pick. Do you think Mordekaiser's in a good spot going into Worlds as a potential pick for top lane?
Definitely. Well, especially against. All right. So the big thing with Mordekaiser is that it really will destroy the teams from regions like North America who are poor at objective control. Awkwardly enough, like in this objective-based meta, like NA will fight over every dragon, but that doesn't mean they actually know how to set up for it or actually win if then the fight happens. And so, like, where Mordekaiser is insanely strong, right, is you ult the enemy jungler in the dragon pit. So then you just get a freebie because their jungler's in the death realm. Yeah. And so, like, we saw that a lot in North American playoffs with the Mordekaiser pick, where, like, I think it was like FlyQuest before they decided that all solo was allowed to play was Ornn, and a couple of other teams were doing this too, and it's very effective. I do think Mordekaiser's big. I think Mordekaiser's big. Renekton is theoretically going to be big. We'll see how it plays out. A lot of that depends on how like the world's meta builds up right now, right? Because like all these teams are playing solo queue on this Chinese super server, and they're scrimming each other already. So we'll see like if when they start playing teams outside of the LPL, if the Chinese teams are like, oh, maybe Renekton is actually just weaker than these other champions that we can also hard stomp lane with. So we'll just play them instead. Or if it'll be the other team saying, oh, we should just like ban Renekton every game because they can somehow win team fights with it at 18 minutes and we can't. And that'll be like the big decider to me on like Renekton top and how that plays in. Jax was largely taken, I believe, as like a counter pick to like the Camille and the Renekton. So we'll see if like how like that the other big picks in that lane work out. But like, you know, it really can shift up there. I kind of wish we were still in like the really carry top lane portion of the meta that was in the regular season, where it was like Kennen, Camille, Jace were like these really strong picks. But it really has moved away from that recently. So we'll see like how it shapes up now with just like the time away. Like Volibear is huge. I'm expecting a lot of Volibear.
In top?
The champion
every
pool,
lane.
Oh, every lane?
The champion pool looks like that if your name is Nuguri.
Yes.
That's the thing. Like, you go back and forth between Impact's page. Impact's most played champions in between spring and playoffs. Ornn, Mordekaiser, Shen.
Yeah.
11 games on Mordekaiser, 11 games on Ornn, 9 games on Mordekaiser, 3 on Shen. So clear, those are the 2 picks in summer and summer playoffs. And then you look at Nuguri's pool for this is all of the summer split plus the summer playoffs. 8 games on Jace, 8 games on Renekton, 7 games on Camille, 5 games on Kennen, 5 games on Wukong. Do you know how many total games Nuguri played Ornn this
0.
entire year?
Why would you do that? Or did he play it once? Wait, he played once in the final. Yeah, that game where they completely changed their play style and stomped DRX.
Once in the final.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So where you have like look at I pulled 369 as another example just to have another thing to go off. 369's most played in summer was Renekton. Played 7 games of Renekton. Then it's Ornn. Then it's Mordekaiser. So most of it's probably going to be these Ornn and Mordekaiser picks. But then you've got guys like a Nuguri who's going to be like, okay, I'm going to play carry and it's going to work because this is where we're at.
What patch was playoffs played on?
Might depend.
Was it 17?
It varied. It even varied halfway through the finals.
Yeah.
In LCK. So yeah.
17, I believe should have been 10-17.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then 18 for like 3 games.
Yeah. So we had 2 patches of playstyle change. I don't think there's anything like super huge in the top lane shift. Like the only thing I see is like a small Irelia buff, which I just don't see the value in Irelia in.
Well, yeah, it's and the people who really play Aurelia are like Brokenblade and Caps. So like all of a sudden like we're talking about the best player who does play Aurelia at this tournament, or the best players I should say, because it's also like Showmaker. So like are like mid laners. So
yeah, so she would go mid.
If Aurelia does show up, it's likely to be mid lane.
The real pick that got touched in 1019 that I think is going to be a factor, not just in top but as a flex pick, is Silas.
Oh.
Because Silas was already starting to show up towards the end of playoffs as people got their hands on it and got buffed in this patch. I believe it was the cooldown on his ult got at level 3, so at level 16, the cooldown on hijack is down to 40 seconds from 60.
Yeah, so like every late game team fight, he's going to be able to do something with that.
At least one ult, and if it's an extended fight, he might get 2 off.
And his healing is an issue in the early-ish mid game, and we like that's a huge thing of like preseason is they're going to be addressing healing reduction, and it doesn't exist right now. So there is a lot of value in Silas like as a lane option in transitioning into late game.
We'll see how it goes. There's one of the mid laners in a lower level LPL team. I don't remember which team it was like a one-trick Silas guy towards the end of the season. He's like notorious for small champion pools. I think it wasn't OMG. It was another one of the lower of the pack teams. And like I didn't see Silas win lane that much in mid. And that could be like one of the bigger things cuz like with the Orianna buffs and everything else happening mid lane too when we get to that, like I believe Silas will mainly still be in that role, especially in like in the teams that are less confident in the meta. They'll probably only pick Silas when the enemy team has a ton of high impact ults. For example, the Mordekaiser and the Shen ult, stuff like that. Where
so that puts him in top lane for me.
Cannon is huge.
Well, it's mainly for the team fights. So and yeah, it could be top lane. Like we'd have to see how it plays out. I do think it would be pretty strong top against weaker teams. It's pretty abusable by those other top lane carry champions in a lot of cases where like playing that into like Jace or Camille could be pretty upsetting. Like although I'd have to think about the Camille matchup. It might be more skill oriented in how it actually plays. But the shield and then like definitely the split push, Camille wins out.
Yeah.
So the other top laner in my A tier, who we haven't talked about yet, is Bin. I'm really hype on Bin. Bin Suning's top laner. He's one of the younger stars on Suning. Suning is fascinating to me because it's like it's a couple of super veterans in SoFM and Sword Art, and then it's 3 younger players who are kind of actually their carries and superstars in some ways, except for Angel. And so Bin in playoffs especially was really having a great performance and popping off. He also is one of these top laners who can win lane very hard and then super punish with leads, especially with SoFM backing him up. However, he also has a tendency to just like hard int if things aren't going well. So that's why he's only in my A tier because and so him and Wunder in the same division is going to be pretty gas because you can actually expect a lot of rumbles topside when that won't happen basically in any other group for the most part, just based off of like the teams that are going around.
Okay. You said you talked about all your A-rank top laners, but I'm going to make you talk about Rascal because I like Rascal's game and I think he's fun.
Rascal is pretty fun. I really liked his Volibear games. Like he also seemed very solid. It's just like when you have to stack him up against the S tier top laners, definitely isn't, in my opinion, able to compete with them, especially just based off of the fact that his team, and a part of it could just be the fact that his team doesn't play around him in quite the same way, where Rascal's not going to be given the Jace matchups as frequently as Nuguri is, and he doesn't have like the really weird pocket picks quite to the same extent that Wunder does. But on the flip side, unlike Bin, he is much more stable, and so you won't expect Rascal to run it down as soon as their team starts losing team fights in that same way. And he can really build CS leads, especially against top laners who are going to be trying to pick these tank v tank matchups.
Well, and he's a player that is designed, as you mentioned, to play weak side, and that I think is an interesting thing about some of the players further down your list is that some of them, like obviously, their teams aren't meant to play around them, and in Rascal's case, your team has Chovy on it. They're not going to play around you. Sorry, like that's how this is going to go down.
Right.
And his champion pool is an interesting reflection of that. We talked about Nuguri's champion pool already. Rascal's most played in the summer: Renekton number 1, Ornn number 2 with 9 games, Renekton with 11, and then Volibear with 5 games across the playoffs, and Karma and Kennen and Camille down the list. We haven't seen Karma at all.
I missed the Karma game.
There were 5 of them.
Wow.
There was not 1.
5.
So, like, I think that's an interesting, like, start of the weak side this discussion, because, like, a player that's gotten talked about a lot that's down in this third tier that is a large third tier of players is Finn, because he's in a group with Nuguri and is gonna probably have a really bad time. But Finn is a player who is a weak side top laner and knows how to play around that because that's how his team plays. And I think that things could go better for him than people think they will.
Yeah. So I mainly saw those Volibear games in playoffs from Rascal, and I liked how you talked about it with him definitely being on like the weak side of the map for his team. But even so, while he's on the weak side of the map, he doesn't lose in CS. And this is like one of my biggest issues with like the NA and EU top laners who play weak side, is that they lose CS on their own, with even if the junglers are like doing weird both bot side shenanigans or their junglers way up, they still end up way down in CS and map position. And so like when I see these top laners who are weak side and they are even or ahead even on their opponents in some of these like double weak side matchups, that's one of the big things I'm looking for who can really rise in this event and push their team to the next level.
That was Worlds 2 years ago. Sorry.
Yeah, you can't use that motif here.
No, it's what Rise? Is it? Which top laners are gonna take over?
Take over. Come on, get on theme.
Take over. Well, take over implies top laners who have carry potential and might rise in terms of that. So Bin in my A tier is who I would like expect to like fulfill that role, especially if in his games against Wunder in groups he shows up. That'll be really sick. I'm pretty excited for the Suning versus G2 matches. I think those will be very quality. And if Impact does manage to arrive at all to the playoffs, like that would be nice. They have to go through the play-ins though first, and I'm actually, this is the most worried I've been for like third seed NA to actually make it out of play-in stages, just based off of current performance of the region. Not necessarily off of like exposure to these other leagues. But yeah. So in the rest category, there's a lot of weak side top laners actually, and that has to definitely tie into the meta, where like Orome and Finn, and even Bwipo from EU all play weak side pretty consistently for their teams. Bwipo's gotten a bit more attention depending on what Selfmade's doing, especially if he like plays the top lane Zillion specifically to just give him more experience again. However, I don't think that's going to get a run back. That game looked really
sketch.
bad.
That was like sketch game.
But like a lot of the others are like play weak top side. The only top laners left who don't necessarily get shoved into weak side role are Brokenblade and Langx occasionally. And so like they're kind of at the head of the pack for the rest of the top laners for me, because their team, and it's not just that their team might put them in a position to like have an advantageous matchup, but Langx is the other Chinese top laner, actually can play Renekton, which is a big benefit. And Brokenblade has played the Aurelia. He's the top lane Aurelia player, and when they've played around him is when TSM started to look better as a unit rather than whatever the hell else they were doing in the game.
Yeah.
So like they're at the top of like the rest of the pack for me, but like all these weak side top laners feel very comparable in a lot of factors. as far as how they play the game and the roles they're put into.
We just talked a lot about top laners, so we're going to move on. That was impressive. I'm glad we had the stuff for it. Steven, I'm going to start the jungle discussion with you. In Eric's top tier, we have Kanavi, Canyon, SoFM, Peanut, and Karsa. Who is your player to watch of those 5?
I think it's interesting to see Peanut where he is and what he can actually do. I don't disagree with him personally being an S, but with him on the team that he is, and with all that comes with that, is he going to still perform?
It's an
Eric,
interesting take.
Back
I
your
love
pick up.
I love it because he's in the play-in stages too. So so we'll get to see more games of Peanut than we will potentially every other LPL jungler showing up. To me, Peanut has to be S tier, largely because of the fact that he is the primary shot caller as well as do anything on his team and why they made it this far. LGD back to Worlds, but in play-in stages is fascinating. We'll see if they continue the trend of LGD of like absolutely flubbing every game that counts. But they did play pretty well in playoffs, I thought. What ended up happening though was Peanut lost to the other junglers who are in my S tier pretty consistently. So that's where it gets interesting to me. My top lane or my jungler to watch in this list is definitely Kanavi. I'm really fascinated to see how many times other teams let him play Nidalee in this tournament. Kanavi's Nidalee is absolutely disgusting, and that's another one of these advantages that I feel exists between the teams from China and then the teams from NA or EU, which is that the Chinese early jungle gameplay mechanics into mid-game team fights is absolutely disgusting compared with what you'll see from some of these other teams. And that Nidalee pick should never be allowed into his hands in this tournament. But we'll have to see how the actual games play out with the meta, too.
I'm curious to see how Nidalee functions, because usually the answer, in my opinion, is Lee Sin, and I don't think Lee Sin is pickable in this meta, and specifically in this patch. I don't think there is enough to Lee Sin in the early game to compete with Nidalee. So is there an answer? It shouldn't be in anyone's hands, honestly, but I think it will be let through on the NA teams or some of the lesser teams. They might be able to pick, like Santorin Nidalee is pretty good. If what's the answer? Do you just play around it, or it's just so wild to me that Nidalee was picked up like Steam, and she should be punishable 100%. That type of hard carry jungler is shouldn't be allowed on the world stage, because you can't risk picking that. But
I'm laughing right now because you mentioned Lee Sin, and my two of the other junglers in my S tier are SoFM and Karsa, who are basically Lee Sin one tricks and are very good at those champions. Correct. SoFM got his team to the spot they got to and earned his world spot without having to go through play-ins by absolutely dumpstering Peanut while playing Lee Sin and the whole enemy team with some sick flash plays and absolutely amazing kicks. It was incredible. So maybe that's one of the biggest differences between these S tier junglers and the rest of the pack is not just what can they do with scaling picks, which has been the theme in a lot of these regions, but also what they can do with picks that shouldn't scale, but then they play in ways that gives them full game impact. And because SoFM really makes that happen, and Karsa is also consistently good at figuring out how to make plays happen on the map. But yeah.
Thank you for setting me up to talk about the jungler I most wanted to talk about on this list, which is the one you didn't, because it's Canyon. Guess who Canyon's most played champion over the summer and summer playoffs was? It was Nidalee. You know who his second most played champion over the summer split and playoffs was? It was Lee Sin. There's a theme here, and it's not just the Chinese teams that do this. That's part of what makes Damwon so scary, is they play like a Chinese team in some of these ways. And Canyon in particular, it's you talk about players that you're not sure if you can let them Italy through against. He's one of them because he's gone off in some of these games. I mean, it's the second highest KDA among junglers played across the summer split, and just was totally dominant. Interestingly, his highest KDA played was Trundle, who does not fit that meta at all.
No,
but that he's another player that he plays for arguably the best team in the tournament and is capable of the pop-off performance that he's not just going to go out and be a supportive player, which is what we can say about it. All these players in the top tier, as the point we've made, is they can pop off and carry a game, which seems to be one of the designations for high placement on these tier lists.
Right. I also really love how Canyon shows up even on like the slightly less focused junglers. I think Canyon has the best set I've seen out of a jungler in this tournament. Like for Jankos, it almost feels like a band-aid to some extent, where just his play style, like giving him a massive shield and an engage ability, like helps balance out so he can just focus on map awareness and making his team shine. But like Canyon's set, like 1v3s, and then Showmaker and Nuguri show up. And that's another thing that really impresses me with Damwon as a whole, is that usually with these teams where they like have like a few all-star carry tier players that we see coming to this tournament, sometimes like G2 looks, it turns out that one of them is really just benefiting or riding off of the other ones doing well. And I don't really feel that way with the top side of the map for Damwon. It really feels like all three of them are really performing at a high, incredible tier going into Worlds, and that it'll be hard for teams to break that or dismantle it when all three of them have such incredible picks and carry potential. Canyon looks incredibly improved, in my opinion, from last year, as does Nuguri, whereas Showmaker still looks incredible. But like those two have really stepped up, in my opinion, and so that top side is really going to be fun to watch.
As we stroll down this tier list, A tier, Eric has Selfmade, Clid, Jankos, and Shadow. In the B tier, he has Inspired, Santorin, and Cacao. And in the C tier, he has Spica and Broxah. Steven, do you have any thoughts or anything you would change among these picks?
If we could go lower, that's where I would put Broxah. Just given the fat daddy check he's been collecting for summer.
Value for the contract might be an influencer there.
But if anything, I think Spica does deserve to be maybe higher than Santorin. Just I think there's value in innovation at Worlds. Usually this is more out of support picks, but I think given like finding answers to things and finding like how to have priority over objectives, innovation and ability to do so in the pinch, and he busted out Rivershen. So I think Spica could like earn his way up in this list in like a hindsight kind of like look back, but I think he should at least be on par with Santorin. I think Santorin has the stage experience where he's going to just hold it together better in pressure situations where Spica may not. But other like, so putting him down because of he's rookie, that's fine. I think I agree with it, but if I was going to make any change, it might be bump him up at least to the level of Santorin.
Yeah, that's reasonable. Spica is the NA jungler with the most potential upside of the three. You're kind of right. Santorin, I really think is a better all-around top or jungler, and will continue to, and will post better average numbers. I think that you talk about innovation, and I think that those innovative picks really worked for the NA meta and what he was going up against. Like we just talked about how these S tier junglers play Nidalee, Lee Sin, and these like carry picks to really snowball games. And I don't think that River Shen or that kind of innovation will hold up as well up against junglers who are able to really snowball the game. River Shen works great into teams that specifically are poor at setting up for dragon fights, and then you can abuse and punish in bad rotations around the map. And that's where like he really showed up in that series on the River Shen, was with abusing NA teams' terrible macro, and that I don't expect that to happen as much at the world stage. I'm even expecting NA to be slightly better at some of these factors, just because, you know, playing teams that are good in scrims might make a difference, especially since most of the teams in NA stopped scrimming the best team for most of this past split out of like some sense of fear. So see how it goes.
And the reason I bring up innovation is not necessarily for the River Shen in essence. It is the worlds functions fundamentally the same way, in my opinion. You find one like unexpected like pick that always becomes like mandatory, like we have to solve for this. Support misfortune, top Darius and Mordekaiser when that was a monstrosity. Like those kind of picks will come out. There will be like the support Alistar, the support Zyra. Like when you have answers for something that is meta. So if anyone's going to come up with some kind of weird pick to stop the Nidalee Lee Sin like competitiveness, I think it's going to come from Spica over Santorin or anyone that's just going to like really stick to like we have to play Volibear, we have to play Set, we have to play Nidalee, we have to play Lee Sin. If any kind of like, oh well, I know this secret pocket pick that's going to put all of those in the dirt and is going to be a mandatory ban for everyone in the tournament because it's so broken, it's so exploitable that anyone's going to be able to pick it up mid-tournament, it's going to come from Spica.
Oh shit! Did I miss him from copying the sheet over, David?
I think something must have happened with it because he's the player I want to talk about because it leads to Steven's point.
Yeah.
Eric's power ranking list somehow cut Pyosik out of a tier.
I thought I had him in the other sheet, so I must have missed him when I copied it in.
I dropped Pyosik into the A tier, and I want to talk about why. And it's because of one of those potential picks that Steven was talking about that could mess with the world's pick. The most recently impactful new champion on Pro Play has been Lilia. And no player in 2020 has played more games on Lilia than Pyosik has. He's played 9 games of Lilia. The team is 6-3 when they've been played. And as more teams work with it and figure out how it works, that feels like it could be one of the biggest impact picks in Worlds. And you look through, clicking through jungler lists, Jankos played it once in a loss. Spica played it like once. Santorin played it like once. Inspired played it like once. If Lilia is a huge impact pick, Pyosik is the guy that's been like, I have this pick, and it's good, and it works, and my team knows how to play around it.
Yeah, Shadow was the most successful EU jungler on Lilia, I think. It's really surprising to me that Selfmade hasn't played it as much, or they haven't.
In a loss.
Yeah, and they haven't rotated towards it. Their game when they lost with Lilia, I don't think it had anything to do with him. That was more of a #fanatic thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Lilia is definitely a strong pick. Lilia also is very bizarre to me because sometimes junglers can make it look very strong and very good, and then some other times junglers get ahead with the pick and then they proceed to just like hard int, and that's a really weird thing to see on a jungle champion. And I think it has to do with like the speed, and then also the macro decisions that have to support that pick also are like a team decision, where it's really about the long range engage and almost follow up then, where you land the bowling ball, you put him to sleep, you hit him with an ash arrow, maybe you drop a Ziggs bomb on him, but I don't think anyone's going to pull out that SK comp, and then you hopefully just like free win a dragon fight. But yeah, I really like the Lilia pick too. It's just very weird watching games with it because of honestly just the map movement for that champion, where the prancing around the map makes it very hard to actually tell what's going on or how much damage somebody's taking.
Steven, what do you think of the Lilia pick in the current meta?
I think it's strong for those that build a comp around it. But if we're going to build comps around things, there's other like off picks that like the Evelyn, the Fiddlesticks. Like those are things like if we're going to open up the jungle pool, those could like I know Fiddlesticks hasn't been seen at what like one game, maybe a couple games. I think it was that
Fiddlesticks has been played mid by Bjergson.
that was one of the tank sticks.
Of,
That's no
did it's had a couple of jungle
Selfmade
games.
played the Evelyn, and then someone played the Fiddlesticks in summer jungle in EU.
Yeah.
I can't remember who it was.
It might have been Shadow. Shadow.
Razork of Misfits.
Razork.
Okay.
So, but it's just like I think Lilia was good just because people didn't know how to really like play against her because she was so new. I think since everybody's developing like core strats, where Lilia was successful is like, hey, we've got her as a pick. We know the composition to build around it in this pinch situation. We can pull it out here and chalk a win. I don't think that's as effective now that she's been out long enough. We're going to be having extensive practice knowing what this patch looks like, and we have all of play-ins to kind of wrap our mind around what the meta is before we even get to group stages. I don't think she'll be as successful as she was in playoffs.
Fun fact, there's only one jungler at this tournament who has played a game on Fiddlesticks this year. It's Canyon.
Like, low-key, I think Fiddlesticks has potential just because of, like, the early game clearing and then objective control. Like, that's what we want. And I guess just because of, like, flavor, people prefer the Nidalee over the Fiddlesticks, but and maybe the safety of doing Nidalee. I don't know. But, like, to me, it's infinitely more attractive to put these high-skilled junglers on Fiddlesticks and Evelyn over a Nidalee.
I think the main part of it's actually the dual power in a lot of ways, where like Nidalee, Lee Sin, it's you can actually invade into the enemy's jungle and force fights there, and then win them. Fiddlesticks is much more like passive clear, kind of along the lines of Karthus, where like that would be kind of the pick that I'd see Fiddlesticks replacing in the meta if it showed up, where it's really about powered clearing your own side of the jungle, and then but then having like a slightly different, like more team fight oriented focus in like these mid game skirmishes. Yeah. So are we getting to the fun lane now?
Oh,
let's
you have a fun lane?
Let's talk about the fun lane. Let's talk about mid lane.
Right.
So the S tier, which I
only have four names on. It could have been five.
Eric and I talked about this a couple of days ago, and the S tier seems pretty clear cut, depending on how much you might believe in some of the lower tier people. It's Chovy, Showmaker, Knight, and Caps.
Yeah,
and that just seems pretty set in stone. I know that should we get any Bjergson fans in our chat or somewhere along the line, they may disagree. Sorry. Nope, they're not. He's not at the same level. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, and going back to the roles in the teams too, right? Where it's like the games that TSM has started to win have not been when Bjergson is playing champions that take over the lane. He's been playing a lot of Zillion, which I'm really hoping doesn't become the pick of this Worlds, although some of the other regions have started playing it now, which is very disturbing. But it's very unlikely. One of the bigger picks is Zoe right now. And so, surprise, surprise, the top four players the ones in the S tier, aside from like BDD and Xiye, are like the best. Well, with BDD and Xiye, they're the best 6 Zoe players in this tournament. So it's pretty immediately obvious where some of this power lies. But yeah, like Chovy, Showmaker, Knight, Caps, these are all mid laners who like win lane, win game. In Showmaker's case, very bigly. In Chovy's case, when the rest of his team could even be falling apart. So I'm really impressed with those 4 and with carry potential as well as picks, and then how they fit into their teams and team fighting. Like they're pretty clear cut above the rest. A tier is actually where things get interesting, in my opinion, in a lot of ways. unless you want to get into a fight over who's better between Chovy and Showmaker at the top of the table in S tier, or if Knight's actually better than both of them, that to me is spicy. I wouldn't put Knight above them personally, just because of watching their series against IG in China, and Knight taking almost a back seat in his team in their series against IG, playing like Galio in those games, losing lane to rookie just to like guarantee his team wins. That didn't feel like what I want out of my best mid laner in the world, for him to be doing that. And then rookie almost 1v9'd them out of the shy feeding for that entire series. But that to me is a part of why I just can't personally see Knight quite as high as the other two, just based off of like how he compares to some of the other high quality mid laners in his own region. Feels closer than the gap between Chovy and Showmaker and the rest of the teams in LCK.
I'd like to make a point about Zoe. You mentioned that you thought that Xiye was one of the better Zoes from LPL.
I
think I disagree with that point.
Ooh, does he lose a lot on it? And
he has played 6 total games across summer and playoffs and regionals. He is only 3-3 on the pick and has a pretty mediocre KDA. Where Yagao...
Oh, it was with Gat. Shit. It was with Yagao.
Yagao is 5-0 on the pick with a 16 KDA in the summer split.
I messed it up. I should have gone to Yagao first. Because like Yagao's another one of these mid laners who has like very narrow champion pools. The fact that I have him in my A tier is actually kind of like upsetting to some people, because of the fact that like if he's off of these comfort picks, he doesn't look good. But like, you know, when he does get these comfort picks, he looks great. He looked pretty good in their games to get to Worlds. So like, and just based off of like the general quality of team fight play out of these Chinese teams over some of the other ones, like I voted him into the A tier above some of these other picks. But yeah, I can't believe I messed that one up.
The interesting thing among these A tier guys is you have the Zoe guys, which like BDD 7 games of Zoe across summer. Yagao 5 plus 4 9 games of Zoe over the summer, and then you have Xiye, whose record is mediocre on it, and you have Larsson and Bjergson, who have played 1 combined game of Zoe across split summer and playoffs.
Yeah,
Larsson has not touched the pick, not once.
Yeah. He's kind of like he changed up in playoffs when he had to, but he really was in a 0-1 trick for a lot of the year.
Which did get nerfed.
Bjergson, yep, and Bjergson has been doing whatever he needs to do. Bjergson to me is at this level just because of how much he is the focal point for his team, even when he's on supportive picks.
Because he owns it.
One of the big critiques I have about NA as a region and these players, which is like why a lot of them are very low in the list, is that a lot of them won games with CS when they are in losing matchups in like very obvious ways, or vice versa, where they like lose lanes that they should be winning. And so Bjergson's kind of high up because he wins lanes he has no business being in. And like the Zillion pick is one of the big ones, but across the board, like TSM has been putting him in these supportive picks and like almost into a weak side role, except he gets a lot of actual focus and attention. And then he like carries from this supportive stance so that Brokenblade on the top side, and then later on in the game, Doublelift and Biofrost actually like
participate.
Kind of are the more they're the more active appearing players in how the game functions, even though it's really all Bjergson. It reminds me a lot of Faker during the era of SKT, where they would have Bang play Lucian, and then Faker would be playing like mid Karma and mid Lulu. And Faker was obviously still the best player on the team. He's just playing Lulu. and when that was the state they were in, and Bjergson feels a bit like that to me. So I put him in this list, but like I could also see that shifting where one way or the other, where either the fact that they're like specifically picking these supportive mids starts biting them to some extent against these other teams who have more mid prio, or and these other mid laners are actually just better, so they can actually contest CS, or the other way around, where it turns out he actually follows through and continues to win lane somehow against better players even when he shouldn't be, and that would skew him up these rankings a bit. So that's where he's interesting. Larsson, I have him in this tier just because he's the better team fighter out of anyone below him in the standings, and he's very consistent. He's the most boring in some ways player on this list, just based off of like consistency being the driving factor for him and a lot of the players on Rogue.
Well, and the interesting thing with him is if you take these 5 players as a group, the pick they share the most over summer is Twisted Fate,
which is nerfed.
And Larsson's interesting point is he had the Azir and Corki as big picks, and the Azir and Akali were his 2 big picks in playoffs. That's a pool that he shares with BDD, who used both of those picks a pretty decent bit. Azir was BDD's most picked by far over the summer split, and he had 4 games on Akali as well, which is a higher pick rate. So that just an interesting little detail from pick rate. Below there, you have the rest, your humanoid, power evil, Jenson, Nemesis. Take one player to watch. Who you got?
So I'm gonna pick the one you didn't name, which is Angel from Suning. Not for a positive light, but from a kind of a negative light, which is Angel is definitely the weakest player on his team, and one of the bigger surprises to me with playoffs for Suning is that Angel wasn't punished, who wasn't caught out, where he was able to play Syndra, and then the enemy team even trying to dive for him would fail, and then Suning would have some insane plays from SoFM and Bin to then win these games. So like to me, like the players actually kind of in a negative way to watch in this set are Angel, Nemesis, and Jenson, where they have a tendency to get caught out and get popped, and like that showing up at this stage is really bad. So the 2 who then maybe to watch from a positive light would be PoE or Humanoid. PoE, I really think he didn't do it in the finals, which was very sad to me. The Victor pick did not do this, but PoE has always been an innovator in mid lane in a lot of ways. So I'm curious to see what crazy shenanigans he shows up with. Hopefully mid Smite Kale is dead to us. But you don't always you don't always hit the mark with these things.
The possibility is never 0.
Well, and with PoE, it's not necessarily about the champions either. It's about the builds and what he can come up with either. Because anytime you watch him build with Nasher's Tooth Orianna, any of the things that he's done along there, he's been an innovator in all the aspects of the game. And he's long been one of my favorite players to watch. So he's absolutely who I would have picked first, because I assume he's going to have something cooked up. We just don't know what yet.
And all these players from either UOL or Misfits historically, I really have high regards for as far as like being able to play up in these groups and make surprises happen. Like that was what they've done historically, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him do it again.
Yep. Steven, you have any mid lane thoughts?
Yeah, like I'm going to be looking towards Humanoid just for the fact that like if Mad Lions finds success, I want to see what part he plays in that, and how that matches up against the mid lane meta and the other mid laners. Just I feel like Mad Lions, and this might be my perception on it, but like they win or lose as a unit, and it's not necessarily because of anyone like showing up personally, but if anyone is solo carrying the game, it's because the team was built around it. And that I'm really, really curious to see how Mad Lions find success and what that looks like.
ADC. We have it's interesting. I think just looking across these lists as a whole, ADC might be the most stacked role we have at this tournament.
That's
I
a
think that's a
interesting
statement
take.
I would make.
Yeah, there are a lot of really good ones.
There are a lot of really good ones, and there are a lot of ones even at the bottom of this list who have been in the best forms of their careers. Like Tactical, obviously. If we start at C tier for this one to mix it up, Tactical's in the best form of his short career at this point already. He's looked like one of the better ADCs in NA. Karsa had one of the better regular seasons in Europe as a first-year player that we've ever seen. And Turtle had a great run in parts of playoffs and is playing at a level that we haven't seen in years from his career. So for those three to be the bottom of this tier list, I think is a huge statement on the quality of the rest of it.
Totally. And typically, like, the big thing that I'll call out about these three who I put at the bottom is that they are the three who going back to this, I've seen take winning matchups and then lose them in lane occasionally. And like Tactical had some better performances in parts of the playoffs with Core JJ, and a part of this might have to do with like TL style and then how Core approaches the game. But they're the three who I've seen like fall behind in CS when they shouldn't necessarily be, and then that can be a big factor when you look at like some of these other ADCs and how they get punished. But like, and part of me could just still be really sad by Tactical's positioning in team fights and then at Baron takes in their last series, because that was very depressing.
You're telling me.
B tier also are, in my opinion, ADCs I'm kind of disappointed in, although they are like all very high quality players.
Well, and it's the thing is when you see B tier and it's Perks, Doublelift, and Kramer, all of whom Worlds experienced, some of the better ADCs are players in their regions.
Right.
Over the past, it looks a little funny to the eye, but then you look at form. Like Doublelift took until playoffs to really get going at all this season. Right. And Perks had on and off moments. Obviously, G2's down and up through this split to get to the championship is well known. Playing off of current form, you could argue that Perks could be a tier higher, but it's more interesting than it was last year.
Yeah. I also feel that like Perks' champion pool isn't as strong this year as it was last year, as far as the meta is concerned. Like his Xiye looked incredible, and Xiye has not been a factor this year yet. It could be now we're going into world stage, but like it does feel like his champion pool's impacted by like what's strong in the meta, and most of the ADCs being played not having the same tier of escapes, because his map play and team fights with Xiye and other champions that had some amount of like of their own capability for manipulating their positioning on the map were like where he looked really strong last year at Worlds. And while we're in this like Ashe meta, it just doesn't feel as much like it's in his wheelhouse. Not to say he's not a great player, it's just that it feels like slightly away from his tier of control in the game. I'd kind of feel like this is also a meta where
Ezreal being 1 and 3 for him, I think, is a thing to note with that. It's just it hasn't been a pick that's worked for him, and he's the most mobile in a traditional sense carry in the meta right now.
Yeah,
and I don't think like he's like the top of the meta either. He's a bare bones pick.
What I'm interested to see from Perks is in the regular season, Kalista was his most played champion. And I think that with some of the nerfs coming down to ADCs in this patch 10.19, that's going to be the Worlds patch, with Caitlyn and Senna both taking some nerfs, obviously. Played a lot of Senna in playoffs, played a lot of Ashe in playoffs. It seems like Ashe is going to continue to be a huge priority. But Kalista's been right there at the edge, and that seemed to be a champion that's worked for him. So I think that could be a big boon as the meta shifts perhaps away from Senna at the very least.
Totally, and I'd expect Kalista to be a higher priority pick in Worlds. I mean, it got a lot of bans in regular season and playoffs in these regions, but I expect it to be a more contested pick at Worlds, because there are less ADCs at this tournament who are uncomfortable on the champion. A lot of like the lower tier bot laners in some of these regions aren't as comfortable on Kalista, or their teams aren't comfortable playing around it because it's a bot focused pick in a lot of ways, and if you get behind, it's really bad. So like, but like all these players, you know, everyone we named in C tier except for potentially Turtle is good on Callista. Everybody at B tier is good on Callista. It continues going up these rankings. They're all great on Callista for the most part. Like, I'm trying to remember how Loken performs on it for when we get up there, but like a lot of these players are very good and comfortable with these early game champions. I called A tier the Draven tier, not necessarily because I expect Draven to show up, although Hansama did play it for a game in playoffs, but because Ghost and Hansama are both like Draven one tricks who have now been
Ghost
elevated.
also played it for a game in playoffs.
Yeah, only they won, didn't they? so there's a bit of a difference there. But like it's but like this is the tier that I have the Draven one tricks in. Ghost honestly might belong higher in these rankings. The problem is that he's on Damwon, so I can't give him a higher ranking than this because, you know, like how do you have 5 players in top position? I don't believe it's possible for teams to have truly 5 S tier players across the board, across all 5 roles, unless they do what G2 did, where they buy the other best mid laner to then role swap around. Like, and I just don't buy that in a lot of ways, especially in regions like Korea that are also extremely like talent deep in a lot of ways, but that also like skill definition is like you see skill differently in LCK than you do in EU in a lot of ways, based off of just how the teams approach the game. But Ghost looked great, so like he's the one from this A tier I think could go higher. The other two obviously are Reckless and Deft, who belong immediately next to each other in all power rankings until the end of time for ADC, mainly because of their like, you know, continual like friendship and but also their like game style and approach to the game. Reckless really has continued to look good, even though Fnatic have looked bad from a stats perspective. I think their team as a whole looks really bad, so it's hard to like understand that. But if you like look at actual stats, both Selfmade and Reckless like are far and away like incredible for their role in their region. And like Def to me is in a really awkward spot because he didn't look as like he was having as much of a game impact in playoffs, and it's really hard to tell how much of that was just due to like the lanes that teams are prioritizing and how the games are playing out, and also the fact that the teams that they are playing against in Korea, I think, have better bot lanes as a whole, and that's pretty crazy. So, but like that's my A tier is like the Draven tier because it's where those players show up, and then it's like got these classics.
Well, and Deft with the casual 11 games on Ezreal this summer, 9-2 in those games. That's a higher priority than anyone else has shown, but there's a reason for that because he can play it better than almost anyone else in the world. That's always something you got to consider. And the other pick that we've talked about, Ashe, is going to be a big deal. He went 4-0 during the summer split with a 12 KDA on Ashe. Like, this is a player that's gonna show up for the Saddle tournament. And it's what makes DRX so interesting, because if they show up, they can beat just about anybody in the world. But it's such a big if with that team.
It's a part of why I'm kind of anxious with you putting Pyosik so high up, because like he's been one of the players on that roster that hasn't necessarily shown up for some of these games, and Doran as well, and that just makes me nervous. But like the bot side does tend to actually show up in client, which is a plus.
Yeah, and like if I was picking one dude to watch out of this A tier, Hansama has been. He gets better and better and better every single year, and it's going by the ever trustworthy world solo queue rankings. He is comfortably the highest ADC of anybody out and about, and he's always been a solo queue monster, and has fit right into the Chinese super server environment. I think he was one of the first 5 to hit challenger of any of the pro players.
His playstyle really fits too, which helps a lot.
So if like that bleeds through into the game effects, I think this could be an amazing Worlds for Hansama. I really do.
Yeah. if Rogue has a chance, it's really
It's
their
for
bot
him.
side.
Yep.
Yeah, and so then S tier. I'm just gonna go out of my way and say Ruler is the best ADC at Worlds in this tournament.
Hot take.
Hot take. It's not that hot take. Ruler's just incredible. I think he had an amazing run for them getting the spot in the tournament. Watching Ruler in life absolutely destroy Deft and Kyria in lane was a surprise to me, because Kyria I have it like the top of my support picks, who when we get to them I think is like the weakest support pool that we've had in a world tournament since before support was really a thing. And then but like Ruler continues to look incredible. Speaking of Kalista players, Ruler's one of the players who I watch and say, yes, this is how you punish lane phase CS as Kalista, and how you just snowball this win, because he makes it look easy. His Caitlyn also looks phenomenal, though that is getting the nerf. So like I'm kind of curious to see what his fallback pick is from those two, because they're like the clear favorites in my mind. But like, you know, he's good on everything, so I wouldn't be surprised if even like, you know, his fallbacks are insanely high CS from or CSD from like what's going to happen. Jackeylove is also returning to the world stage with his and Jackeylove looks really on form on TES. Giving Jackeylove a top laner who actually knows how to show up and play the game and doesn't go like 110 Yasuo power spike has really shown up that like, hey, you know, he can team fight very well. And continues to. Like the other two on my S tier could potentially be the ones who drop. Like Huangfeng on Suning is like one of their rookies, who looks incredible to me. I think his Jhin is really good, as well as his Ashe play. Like I have him really high up because his team fights are incredible and his CSD is really good. And that's one of the big things that like, you know, I've been harping on is winning lane. And like I really think that Huangfeng has the chops to really compete in team fights, especially, and like to outperform a lot of the ones from lower in these standings, especially assuming a gold advantage. Loken's also kind of weird. I'm really high on Loken because his team fighting is insane. Other people aren't as high on Loken because he has a limited champion pool. However, going into Worlds, Ashe is in meta. Sivir's entering meta. This is a Loken meta, so it seems pretty good as far as that's concerned.
And he's the defending world champion. Just saying.
So you
or not world champion,
LPL champion.
Yeah. LPL champion.
But
them winning was a surprise to like a few people because top is really good, but like Loken and team fighting like showed up and his picks were strong.
Loken played a grand total of 2 champions in the playoffs in LPL summer, Ashe and Jhin.
Yeah, his Ashe is phenomenal.
So bringing up nerfs and buffs, which I think affects bot lane carries the most, does something like Sivir or Aphelios make a comeback with the changes, specifically nerfs to the top tier?
I think Aphelios is back.
Aphelios, definitely. Aphelios is going to show up a lot.
Yeah.
So all these nerfs and buffs are good. One of the things they didn't change about the game, though, is the fact that you're going to look for champions who spike on 2 items and then are still good on 3 and 4 items. That's like that 2-item spike is really what we're looking for. And Aphelios is really strong on Hurricane plus anything else, but specifically like IE Hurricane. So and then continues to scale into 200 years. So it's really clear that he can take over the game.
Mm-hmm.
Sivir is more interesting to me. I'm curious. It might take somebody pioneering a build order for Sivir, kind of like what happened with Caitlyn, where you get it so that you can spike earlier into these mid-game fights. Because like Sivir traditionally is a like 500 gold or
500 CS,
or not 500 CS kind of champion, and that's not how the game is played right now. 500 CS is when you're fighting over second Elder Dragon, and that's not a good place to be if that's where you're going to start pushing back.
But that is a best of 5 like pick though. Like looking at like how 80 like to me, best of fives are always dictated through how you're pivoting in your bot lane. Are you getting a side selection where you're getting the priority and know how to adapt to those picks? Like where that's where the innovation always comes in, through the support picks. So like I think like Sivir and Aphelios and Jhin, I like that Jhin was brought up, are once we get past the best of ones, that's where it's really going to get interesting, and we're going to see a lot of those picks over the Caitlyn's and the Sennas and the Comfort.
I'm curious
do you think there's a chance that any ADC who's not in this meta at all comes in? I know we saw, I believe it was a scrim leak posted to Reddit yesterday where we saw Twitch get played. Something to that effect.
I think if it's anything, it's a caster like Ziggs, Syndra, Yasuo, those kind of like things. Like those might be like if you're gonna go a wild counter pick, I think that's where teams will reach to. I like Twitch, especially with Shen. So Twitch Shen, like I would bet that's what is that what the leak had?
It was Twitch Yuumi.
Which is just as bad.
Yeah. So Twitch is one of the like enablers for Yuumi to still be good, and so like that I could see as a thing. Those kind of picks that twist it usually are around like warping how the game is played, right? So Bjergson Zilean pick. All of a sudden teams have to remember, oh shit, don't blow every major cooldown to kill the Olaf because the Olaf's gonna res and all your abilities are on CD and it's really bad.
And he's gonna click on you with his Viking rage.
Right, and then like Twitch Yuumi is a similar thing, or Evelyn Yuumi, where it's like it has to do with like that stealth factor. And all of a sudden teams have to remember how vision works and change warding positions, which is a really big deal. So like I can see that kind of happening. I think the Evelyn would be the bigger surprise pick from a stealth perspective, just because like from the jungle it offers a lot, and with the jungle itemization it's more impactful. Like Twitch can definitely happen though, and it's a sick pick. It's absolutely disgusting if it gets ahead or pops off. It also really punishes teams that are bad at map rotations. Surprise, surprise.
Well, and there's like there's the other things that could be on the fringe of this. Like if you think about if we get to like a Sivir, Aphelios kind of late game meta, could you play a Jinx? Could you get away with Jinx's laning phase and have that kind of hyper carry stuff at the late game? Could you play a Kog'Maw? Or
Vayne.
Do you go a different direction and go into this Vayne? Vayne gets a buff on her ult in this patch, and it's been really hard to get away with ever in the past because she's so short range and she's so easy to punish in lane.
So is here where I make a bet?
Ooh,
gentlemen.
Let's do it.
Is this where
a gentleman's bet?
So my bet is that if Vayne is played in this Worlds tournament, the first place it is, or outside of play-ins, I don't trust play-ins,
yeah.
But in group stages, the first time Vayne is played in this Worlds tournament is not in bot lane.
It's top lane.
It's in mid lane.
Nope, it's top lane into Ornn.
Top lane into Ornn is a thing, but I'm going mid lane because Caps is going to play it once, and like they'll lose horribly, but he's gonna play it. That's like what he does. So I'm thinking the first Vayne picking groups is Caps in mid.
We'll write that down.
I think it is Zoom against Rogue.
Zoom against Rogue.
Zoom against Rogue. Ooh. I think that's what happens.
Ooh, I want that to happen though too. So I'm all right. So what's our bet? What's our bet going to be?
You're gonna buy some merch. Get somebody some merch. Yeah.
Well, that works for. I guess yeah. So, like
although like G2 picking it, I think makes more sense from a comp construction standpoint because they're also. Steven talked about potential non-traditional ADC things happening in the bot lane. G2 is the team that will put Yasuo Gragas down there.
Hell
and
yeah.
Syndra and these other picks, yeah. That's the advantage of having the second best mid laner in your region rotate to ADC. Yeah, you can play nonsense. So, but
well, and that Yasuo Gragas lane, like you want a way to deal with an Ashe, go get her.
Yeah,
make her not alive. The best form of CC is a gray screen.
And it's a great counter to Ash Arrow as opposed to like having to pick Tom Kench or Braum, right? Braum is incredibly weak, but Mickey and some of these other players have been playing it just because it's a way to stop Ash Arrow from ending your game. And so like Windwall is an even better way to do that. But
yeah, as we transition into thinking about the supports, as this kind of naturally does, you have Keria, Lumao, Beryl, and Life as your S tier, which I think is interesting that this is the year of the Korean supports.
I think they've shown up really well. Like a part of this to me is that Yu Yanja in like so a lot like I've had Chinese players that are like really high up in a lot of these lists, and not as much in this one. Lumao is like the best Chinese support in this tournament. In a lot of ways, or from a Chinese team, I should say, and supports in LPL, I don't think also show up very well from an eye test perspective. Basically, due to the way that the fights constantly happen. So Lumao has great map presence. Sword Art also has great map presence, but I have him a lot lower because of just the way these fights play out. Sword Art dies a lot. And so, like, that's a part of, like, where this tier list is weird to me, is that the LPL supports, like, as a whole, don't look that good from an eye test, and then also, like, don't feel like they fit very well with what's happening. Versus Keria, Beryl, and Life all look really good in a lot of ways and have won their team games. Beryl's gotten a lot of praise for his play, and with Damwon, which... So I feel kind of awkward putting him up in this tier and not putting Ghost in S tier, I guess. But like Beryl's looked really solid. I think Beryl and Life being this high, in part to me, is just like how weak a lot of supports feel, just with what's going on. Keria had a great regular season, did not look as good in playoffs. The support pick out of LCK that I think is the coolest so far is Surprise Surprise Support Set, which still gets played there. I don't see it much in these other regions, but like watching, like I mentioned, Ruler and Life absolutely destroying Defting, Keria, and Lane, and that was like a Callista set lane, I think, and that was just a pleasure to watch happen. So
Probably
like,
gross to experience, though.
Oh yes, definitely. So that's kind of my take on like.
So I'm going to do the thing where I
Korean
keep talking about Dom1 players, because I think I've talked about every Dom1 player, because I like Dom1 a lot. I think Beryl might actually be my biggest question mark with Dom1 going into the tournament, only because I wonder if a team can figure out a way to punish him. Because you have this dude who, he's been an amazing player. He's played on the best team in Korea. They've won a bajillion games. And he's doing it with his most picked champion being Pantheon. He has played 10 games of support Pantheon in this LCK, more than any other champion, and he's 9-1 on the pick. Because
he looks great with it, yeah.
It looks awesome, and he's the only one that can do it. Everyone else feeds on the pick in LCK. They've all tried it. It doesn't work it doesn't win games for anyone else. And you wonder, like, as you go across regions and you have people who've been watching these VODs all year and watching how the pick is played and maybe trying to figure it out for their own use, is who somebody can maybe figure out an answer to dealing with what he's doing. Because I think, like, Dom1's bot lane has been amazing. It's the weakest part of their map because their top side is that good. And it's the one thing I have a question about with them is, like, can somebody figure out the answer to dealing with Beryl? Because if they can, you might be able to get a win over Dom1.
A part of my concern there is, like, I feel it, like, so the advantages of Pantheon, right, is you get the damage prevention shield, kind of like what you get with Braum, so you can just soak it up. And then you get kind of a global ultimate closer to Tom Kench, where you can show up on flanks, join fights from weird angles, and then drop a stun on like an ADC or a mid laner. So like there's like those are like the strengths of that pick, is that you have this blocking shield, you have a point and click stun, and then you have this semi-global ultimate that lets you pick people off or create lopsided encounters. So with a part of the problem is that a lot of supports don't look that strong to me, and so we'll have to see like who can show up with it. Why he looks good as opposed to some of the other players who played it, even in LPL, I haven't seen it look too great. Is that Damwon is really good at having pressure in lanes for Pantheon to show up to or to start fights in, and then other people to show up. And it's like Pantheon is a terrible support pick if you're losing. So kind of to your point, like if teams do find a way to put Damwon as a hole behind, so Pantheon showing up doesn't mean as much, that would be one way you do it. Because you have to have an advantage or a lane matchup where a support teleporting onto you and stunning you for like a second isn't going to swing a 1v1. That's kind of my take on the pick and why it looks bad, especially in NA. When you're 5v5ing for Dragon, map positioning with your support doesn't mean as much. And that's like one of the bigger issues with the pick when like Ignar plays it, is like you don't get the same advantage or map pressure based off of like how your team like pressures lanes and manages to get advantages there. But yeah, he's the only person who's been making it look good. So
it's interesting because it seems like there's got to be something there because it's such a non-traditional pick, but it's worked for him and no one else.
yeah. So
we go down in the A tier, we've got Killua, Core JJ, and Kaiser. In the B tier, we've got Mickey X, Sword Art, Yuyanja, and Vander. And in C tier, as we seem to continue doing, we have the FlyQuest player, the Fnatic player, and the TSM player. Ignore Hillsong and Biofrost at the bottom.
Yeah.
Steven, do you have a player that draws your eye from the lower tiers of this list that you think people should have their eyes on?
I think that depending on how the games go, I do think Ignar could be someone to watch because he does try stuff. He does have but I mean, FlyQuest is just such a big question mark on the international stage. They have the talent as far as like the old guard, and I think they can do some really innovative stuff. But I who's their coach? I never.
FlyQuest coach?
Yeah, FlyQuest's coach. Who's their coach? Does anyone know?
I haven't the slightest idea.
Yeah.
It's
Because while you're looking that up, it really depends on prep. Because I think when... So,
it's David Lim.
Yeah.
I don't even know who that is. I'll be really honest.
Formerly of... He was with TL for a couple of years in 2015, 16, 17. With Clutch in 2018, with Schalke and Excel last year, and has been with FlyQuest this year.
Interesting. So when you looked at Team Liquid last year, which was what it was, it looks like they had stuff that they wanted to try, but they couldn't pull it off due to the conflict of voices or whatever. I feel like at Worlds, the first team to make a mistake, it starts losing, or the first team that isn't able to innovate or move into whatever the new innovations is mid-Worlds starts to lose. Where FlyQuest is a question mark for me as one of the lower teams coming into it is they could find success and stick with it and do well. I don't know how far that'll carry them or how long it is till they get found out, but they have talent. Like Ignar was on the Misfits teams that took down SKT or took SKT to 5 games. Like Santorin has 1 million years. Like Wild Turtle has 1 million years of experience. Could they could this be the time to show up on the international stage? Maybe. I don't know. It's just very weird.
Ignar has only been to World once and he popped off.
Yeah.
Let's remember that.
Yeah.
Let's remember that.
He did the song and dance and he really impressed. I don't think we've seen the extent of an older group of players. They haven't hit their peak, and if they hit it at Worlds, that'll be interesting to see.
And interestingly, I have a similar point, but mine's about Hillsong. I think if Fnatic's going to have a chance, like we have seen peak Hillsong before, And he's an incredible player when he finds picks that work, when he finds stuff that's going on. That has not been how his year's gone. And let's be really honest about that. He's been awful this year for a lot of it. But he's got a track record of a guy that can come out and perform. And I'm still going to have the confidence that I think he can play a solid tournament at Worlds. And I think he has to if Fnatic's going to have any shot.
To a further point on both of them, they're both like playmakers who are playing champions who you expect to really shape the game. Hillsong's Pyke, Bard, Rakan, like his primary picks, if they work, are great. The big problem with Hillsong is that it does feel like he's on a completely different page from the rest of the team. And it's kind of the same thing with Ignar, only it's less of an inhibiting factor, where he's picking these pick champions to try and snowball games, and then Turtle, PoE, Santorin are playing a very measured and controlled game, and so it's just always interesting to see like how it plays out, because sometimes it works well for FlyQuest, and sometimes he looks very awkward on a team that seems to have a very consistent game plan. So that to me is a part of why they ranked low. I also thought that both of them had very bad closing performances to their playoff runs.
Correct.
Versus Bio, who had a fantastic finals, but I thought looked terrible in a lot of the regular season.
Everywhere else.
Like getting benched. So also like his only pick that really looks strong to me is the Bard. So I wonder how much they're going to get to play it and how much it's in meta going into this tournament. It's weird to me that Bard's kind of fallen off on the support pick list in some ways. It still is a high pick, but it's not to the same extent. Just because of the fact that like the counter Rift Herald charges is so oppressing to like teams' macro position making on the game. It's another one pick that just completely has to change how teams approach the game, where all of a sudden you take Rift Herald at 15, you better like deep invade before you drop it, so you make sure the Bard didn't roam up to drop it on the turret, and just like negate like half like the past 3 minutes of your jungler's setup and then combat time, which is an awful feeling. The people left in B tier to me are like Mickey could be higher theoretically, but he hasn't looked as good this split either. As a whole, it could be because of Perks' form, but Mickey's felt less impactful in the games. Sword Art, I already mentioned. Yuyanja's new. He's like the youngest player in this grouping. Vander, I think, is really good and really stable, but like consistency isn't what put people higher on my list than any of these things. It's playmaking.
Well, and that's like core, I think, needs to be acknowledged for that as much as anybody does. You have a guy who went out and won MVP of LCS this split and is playing like let's look through his most played between playoffs and summer split. 8 games on Bard, 8 games on Thresh, 3 games on Blitzcrank, 4 games on Blitzcrank. Like, he is playmaking. He is out there getting stuff done for the team and had one of the best splits of his very, very solid career.
Yeah, that's his second MVP for LCS, if I remember correctly. And as a TL fan, defined, as much as I shit on them, I do have a place of love. I think Core JJ is the bright light on that team. And I think Tactical is stepping up to be just as bright in there. I think he needs more time to get polished up, if he could do it in between and really utilize these play-in times to get up there. I think that's really cool. Broxah is not showing up, and I don't think Jenson is either. And I think Core JJ, like, going off topic, build that team around Core JJ. Keep him around. Utilize his playmaking with people that are willing to follow up or are capable. I don't know what's going on per se. Like they did really solid. They took first with, like, I guess from everyone's nose, because they're like, oh, it's, whatever, it's TL. Like they're just like chunking down the wins. It felt nice. But when we're coming to the world stage, you have to have the jungler show up. You have to have your mid laner either participating in the game or showing up, and you have to have your top laner like holding it down. And I don't think Core JJ is fortunate enough to have teammates to do that right now.
Yep. Go off.
Yeah, it feels good to get off my chest. Something going in, speaking of teammates, is roster swaps. Like, are they bringing in, are people running in with 7-man, 6-man rosters into this tournament? Is that allowed? I don't know.
I think the only one that I've even heard about that is likely to is doing it because of an emergency roster situation, and that would be PSG Talon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's one, I believe. It's one sub player. The reason, which team's Flame on again as a sub? Because Flame's not going, is why I remember it, because
I know that G2 has Pinoy there, who obviously got some time in the summer split while Perks was out dealing with the situation, and he's their 6th man, so would sub in the case of them needing someone else to put in the bot lane. And I assume that's true for most of the other teams, but I don't know if there are examples of 6 men, let alone ones who would actually play it. You obviously would expect it more of the Korean and Chinese teams, but the ones we see in this tournament have run relatively stable rosters the entire season.
Yeah, because I think barring last Worlds, like the 2 Worlds before that, we had some best of 5 swapping in different players, and I think teams were starting to see the benefits of having deeper champion pools just because they had a 6th man. I'm curious to see, just as the sport of this evolves, if that's better utilized, and if someone can pull that out as hey,
one would have been the team you would have wanted to make Worlds if you wanted to see the swaps, because they so aggressively tried to get their roster right this year.
Yeah.
And they would have, I don't know how they would have adjusted their 6, because they played with up to I think 8 players throughout the split, swapping out Faker, swapping out Teddy, swapping out well, actually 9, because they had swapped out top and jungle as well. So they were the team that swapped most aggressively this season that was any good. Obviously, you had teams down the lower end of the table in LCK, like your Sandboxes, your Afrikas, who were trying to get a combination that worked. But these top end teams, you haven't need teams given their 6-man time. It's been we've got our 5, we've got it right, and that's what it is this year.
Yeah, I feel personally, for the industry, that's tragic, because I do think that that radically shakes up what you can do as a team. If someone's got your lane figured out, swap them out, put in someone brand new in a best of 5 situation, that's going to give you a huge advantage. And I wish teams leveraged that more, and I don't know if that is a LOL esports we're barring that kind of as an option, but I hope to see that. I think it has to come to light at Worlds for it to be more utilized in this regular season.
My argument is it's not going to happen in regular season, and regions don't play best of series. Sorry. That's the problem in the EU. If you don't play a best of series in your regular season, that's not going to happen.
No, that's what I'm saying. It has to happen at the international stage for everybody to be like, this is a thing that should probably be more, because for the industry, for the sport, it is a unique advantage. And we can just radically open up our ability to move with the meta or move within a best of 5.
Well, and I agree with you. I do, but let me present a counter argument. Mm-hmm. Say you have 2 junglers, since that's one of the easier ones to swap in and out. You got somewhat of a smaller champion pool to choose from, somewhat of a smaller other thing going on. In theory, by more deeply defining those players' champion pools, you actually make what you're doing with your roster more predictable entering a game, making it easier to ban out and making it easier to plan against. When okay, when this player's coming in, I know that it's going to be, let's say, a tanky jungler. They're going to play Sejuani. They're going to play a set thing instead of a Lee Sin or an Italy. That's easier to plan against. Okay, I'm going to ban Sejuani, and I'm going to pick away another one of your picks, and then okay, are you going to come out and play a carry jungler now, since now you're not playing your carry jungle player? I don't know if that's necessarily better from a pure competitive standpoint.
Well,
changing the way the whole team plays is really hard based off of smaller roster subs. The jungle, to the other point for why it could be a great role for that, is more of just for that old mindset from the StarCraft competitive scene, where you send a player out to get a glimpse at how the other team is approaching early game and mapping and pathing, And so then your second jungler is sitting backstage with the coach, figures out exactly how you want to move through the map in the early game. And then you sub them in.
That was a Freaka this year. That's what
Yeah,
they did every single time.
Spirit.
Spirit did not play game 1, but so Spirit got to watch and calculate and then come in and face roll 2 and 3.
Yeah. So that's another team that would have really been advantaged from this. Although, man, does Dread not inspire confidence. But that's so like jungle and support are roles where that can work even with similar champion pools. Yanja's really solidified his starting role on top. He would be like one of the players where and some of these teams might consider having veteran players for some of the rookies just in case. Like that would be one of the other spots where this could happen. Is like you have these young players, world stage for the first time, potentially on stage for the first time, because of the world we're in right now. That could be a big deal. So that would be like another way that could go through. Kind of going into it, there are some teams that have been really experimenting with rosters more in some of these regions, but they were not the teams that made it. Like IG is notorious for subbing Ning in and out repeatedly based off of random things, as well as I think even the Shy had some bench time this season. So but they ended up not making the cut this time, and so we'll have to kind of see how this plays out with the teams that did make it. They are typically more stable, though.
So as we start to consider the groups in this tournament and what's going on, we obviously start with the play-in groups of 5 teams this year. 4 teams will make it out, 1 going into each group. The expected teams to make it out are obviously Mad Lions, Team Liquid, LGD, and then a 4th team to be named. Most people are favoring UOL out of the LCL. Do you guys think that the play-ins are going to develop as expected and those will be the 4 teams to get out, or do you think it will go another direction? Where's the chance for an upset?
Well, so first off, isn't UOL technically an upset because there's the second place team from is it Taiwan?
So I'm going to give UOL the favorite status just because PSG Talent, I think, are now almost playing with an entirely different roster from the one they qualified for Worlds for.
Shit.
They've gotten hit really hard by visa problems and have had to pull in. I think they've pulled in subs from 3 different teams in the whatever is it the PCS these days?
I think PCS, yeah.
Yeah, the PCS league. And so they've had to pull in, and like they're pulling in good players who have played time in the league. But it's just you're trying to put together a team with a week to go to Worlds, and I think that's going to be a huge problem for them, even though they do enter as theoretically one of the 4 teams that should get out. I have trouble believing that they're going to be a thing. So I would favor UOL in that situation.
Okay, that's fair. Personally, I don't. As great as the Albus Nox run was, I think that, like, generally speaking, I guess this year is really weird because the teams from like the other regions that I expect to show up in the groups or in the play-in stage are either the Vietnamese teams or teams from like Garena or like Bangkok Titans or whoever it was. Was that the team that I'm thinking of, or are they also VCS? But like, I'm going to be terribly bad at geography for this entire thing.
It doesn't help that the PCS condensed some of those regional leagues together, and that the VCS wasn't able to attend the tournament. Both.
I've seen Saigon Jokers for play-ins in like 3 or 4 different leagues, so it's like I don't remember anymore. But this one is kind of weird then because some of those teams aren't there. I still might favor Supermassive, although they had a tougher run to get here than UOL did, just because of like
prestige,
personal bias that like for which regions do well when put into these play-in stage scenarios. And typically, I'm gonna make a lot of like random people angry. Brazil and Russian. The Brazilian and Russian teams tend to fall apart in these play-in scenarios more than teams from some of the other regions. And so a part of it could be chalked up to infrastructure. The LCL is like has built up, but is still known to not have the best like infrastructure and player support especially compared with Turkey, which has a much more robust scene in like at least a financial perspective. And so like I'm gonna try and err towards those teams that have more support than these other ones. But there's obviously there's a lot of hype for stuff. I always want teams from like either Latin American North or South to show up and do well. One of their players being like one of the top ranked players on the Chinese Super server right now is fascinating. I'd love to see him do well.
R7 is my pick to maybe throw a wrench into this, because you've got now the group B that is LGD, UOL, R7, PSG Talent, and V3 from Japan. I think is partially because of PSG being in not a great shape, in a really interesting place, because I think any of the 3 play-in teams could go on a run and get up to where they're in a good spot. I believe only the last place team is eliminated after the group stage of this, and then it's 3rd place, 4th in the same group, and then they play across groups after that, I'm pretty sure. So it's hard to get eliminated quickly in this, which means that a team like R7, we did some research on this when we were doing prep a couple of nights ago. R7 came in through a gauntlet format and won 3 straight best of 5s to get to this tournament, and therefore they're coming in
hot,
in good form. They've got good synergy working together. You've got Jose Deodo, which Eric mentioned, is looking like an actually really good player in the Chinese Super Server solo queue. And it's enough together that it makes you say, if enough pieces go right in 4 or 5 or 6 games here, that's a team that could get a 2nd place in a group and could win a couple of games and get into the main stage of the tournament, which would be an enormous achievement for a Latin American team.
So,
and on the other side, the other group is harder, but I'm going to keep doing the thing that's the opposite of what Eric is doing, and believe in one of the teams that always chokes at this stage of the tournament, which is the Oceanic team. Because I think Legacy are as good as they've ever been coming in. They have Raze in the bot lane as one of the best players to come out of Oceania. He's someone who you could see make the jump to NA if another team chose to import a player like an FBI. Raze would be the first person I would look at to come out of the region. And they are as complete a team as you can see coming out of the OPL, but this is where OPL teams go to die every single year. And I want it to work, but I think Mad and TL are both going to be in just fine shape to get out of their group.
I hope so, but I do think that like Supermassive has like some gateways that they could get through. Like, I mean, Stomage is that not they've been here before. They can play this game. So
well, and from a Supermassive perspective, the fact that they have a couple of very experienced Korean veterans on their roster is important to note, in Kakao and Snowflower.
Yeah,
because that's a big bonus. I should note that Stomage hasn't been on their team since the end of the spring split, but
no, Stomage isn't playing.
No.
Oh, well then
he retired after spring, my dude.
Oh, they have him on the site.
Well, they're wrong.
Come on, Riot, get it together. Wait, so who'd they bring besides Kakao?
Our Kakao and Snowflower are in their roles. Zeitnot's playing ADC, and then Armut is the name of their top laner, and Bolulu is the name of their mid laner.
Right. So they don't have a. So they just put so much. God. LOL Esports, why do you bully me like this?
And I mean, I hope Game
so yeah,
is right.
Yeah, like Kakao is like a strong player.
I haven't followed the TCL this year, but they've been pretty good on everything else I've looked at.
Yeah,
Kakao's pretty good. Snowflower is incredible in my opinion, and so like I think he's a great player in one of these regions for teams trying to make it in. It's fascinating from like the major region teams that like are making it out. I'm pretty confident that LGD is going to make it out this time. Like Peanut, has looked on form, and I don't believe that these teams are going to have like the mid jungle synergy necessary to push them back, and that's kind of like the simple answer to it. Like that they're just going to be able to push their way through, and then TL and Mad Lions, that group might get more interesting. It really depends though, because TL and Mad are both much more consistent teams in a lot of ways, and being a consistent team frequently is good against these teams in the play-in stages, except the ones from Vietnam who aren't here. So that puts them in a decent spot for being able to hold on to their spots. But a lot of it does matter on form, like, what is good though, if you're rooting for a team that is in these play-in stages, is that frequently the play-in teams from NA or EU typically end up doing better or overperforming the teams that get the direct bye into the main event, because they've just had more game time on the patch again. On the stage, and so like TL actually, like, having these play-in games, it might be massive for them and for tactical getting up to speed, having some of these quote unquote easy games before you get shoved into this group with G2, Machi, and Suning. That's maybe. Like a big maybe most likely, yes, but maybe most likely
that somebody else could make it out.
Yeah, well, it matters if if they don't make it out, yes. And like also like if Mad makes it out, they're guaranteed to have that spot if they make it out, because of the way like the four teams for EU and China make groups very predictable. In if the expected teams make it out, because Mad Lions can only be on Group C, and so like that makes it very obvious.
And like, LGD can only be in group.
Wait, Mad Lions, is it D? Shoot, did I?
Mad goes in D. LGD goes in C.
Yeah, LGD.
Assuming
right.
two of them out.
Yeah.
But then the trick is, if Team Liquid gets out and a team that's not, I think it's a team that's like not PSG Talon gets out, then TL could go in B instead of A. Yeah. That's a thing. Like if R7 gets out somehow, then.
That's definitely preferable, being in Group B with Damwon and JDG. Yeah,
I'm just saying, TL fans, it could be much worse for you.
Yeah. So, but like we have seen that, and I think it was Cloud9 last time who came out of the play-ins and then looked really improved going into the actual group stage. Right off, and like hit the ground running out of the gates, because like that's been traditionally the bane of NA in groups, is either week 1 or week 2, where like one of the 2 weeks they're just
can't
absolute
show
garbage.
up. And
so like, when week 1 is bad, it looks like they're slow, like they're behind on the meta, they don't know what they're doing, and then they get dumpstered. Where week 2 looks good where week 2 they fall apart is when week 1 the teams go in with these cheese strats, and they get like some freebie wins off of it, like Cloud9's infamous Tristana Viger bot lane nonsense. And then week 2 hits, and teams just ban it, and then they lose because they can't actually play the real meta stuff. And so it's like, it's so
who
like
in playoffs. Somebody lane swapped in playoffs.
In North America,
you're talking about, or no, you're talking in Europe. You're talking about the match versus Schalke, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't that even SK? Wasn't that SK Schalke or something?
So maybe somebody's going to try to pull out some lane swap.
Yeah, that was really hilarious when they tried that, because here's Odoamne, who like lived through that nonsense, and just is like, all right, here's what we're gonna do. In approximately 30 seconds, you're gonna go to this lane. and like they were interviewing Gilius after that series. He's like, I'm glad Odo was here, because then I didn't have to know how to do anything. We just like, because
I almost hope that comes back, because there aren't that many like top laners specifically that played
who are
at that
still
time.
around.
Impact, let's go.
Impact, yep.
Yeah.
What a fun time.
It's an idea. I don't like. It feels really weird with turret plates
I want someone to pull out a lane swap meta and put Ziggs in the bot lane.
Yes, Ziggs.
Then you get your turret down first because of Ziggs W.
So it's weird, and like, yes, Ziggs W. However, like, a part of what makes it weird is that like how turret defenses work. So early plates, you don't. So like they've made it easier for mages to take turrets overall in the game, where magic damage can like hit turrets on your auto attacks to give mages some ability to pressure turrets. But like in early game, that's not like active yet for plates really, or at least for like so many minutes at the beginning of the game.
Mhm.
I don't remember if it's like 5 or 8 minutes, but like for that early phase, it's not on. So like
So
if you
then-
lane swap with the Ziggs, like you can finish the turret, but you can't like start it very quickly on your own. You need like a Lucian or some other champion who like can apply rapid autos to that sucker to get
Okay,
it low.
so work with me here. For your first buy, you buy Elixir of Sorcery. So you get
Jesus
extra damage to structures on your auto attack.
No, this is some next level
Big
theory
brain.
crafting. I think if lane
Can
swapping,
you even buy elixirs that early in the game? Did they like stop that at
No.
some point? Or am I thinking of back when it was
no
like
idea.
the
I don't think
250
so.
elixirs?
I don't think so. But the whole point is like you have to be able to bully the waves into the tower and let the minions just like chunk it down. Cheeky, like, I don't think it's about getting first tower. It's about getting like farming 2 to 3 plates off of everything and then properly utilizing that first herald. If it's going to be effective, that's what you're doing. Is just like getting the first wave of plates, taking that first rift herald, taking that first dragon, because how you're like moving the lanes around. So it's not like a permanent swap. It's just like we're just going everywhere and taking all of that early game gold and snowballing that into the team fight advantage into the mid game.
But
Unfortunately, you have to
how am I working-
surrender. You have to surrender first dragon if you're the one forcing the lane swap.
Right.
Because like your jungler has to be top side of the map. It's really about dodging losing lanes is like the big benefit, right? So like you can pick stuff that like say would have gotten dumpstered by Callista, and then you like have them instead get like 3 free turret plates or some number of them. Even if it's spread out, like you're like kind of even on gold at that point. And then you like set both top laners insanely far behind. That's
So-
what happens.
So the other like a way to make it work in this meta, and like again, I am literally terrible at this game, so I'm just theory crafting stuff that probably doesn't work. But if you were to run some kind of comp that could hard dive at level 6, if you rotate up at the spawn of the first Rift Herald and 5-man dive top lane, if people don't see it coming, then like you get a kill, maybe 2 kills if the jungler's around, because you have the duo advantage in top lane, whatever, if you play like a Galio in mid lane, so you've got a really easy dive setup or something like that.
Power farm
So then
nocturne.
you
Power
dive-
farm nocturne.
You dive the turret, you take the plates, you take the Rift Herald, you rotate back around the map, and like use that as just your all-in commitment on this point. I don't know if it's a good idea, but it's different.
So the fighting for Herald on first spawn is pretty meta at this point. Like the big difference that
No,
you're
I'm saying
proposing
you
is
kill
the
them first.
dive, right?
You
so
kill them first.
Yeah, and so that's really fascinating. Because it implies to some extent that like, to make that work, you're gonna need to have a really like it's awkward because you like Elise. Like and it pains me to say this, but like Elise would be one of the champions that could make that work, or somebody who has turret aggro resets. And the reason why is because it's not just for the dive. You actually need to have vision advantage in topside, because like so you have to press into the enemy jungle topside in advance, because when Rift Herald is spawning, the enemy team will be having their support walking towards Rift Herald before it even shows up. And so it's like, how do you like pressure them so that they're going to be slow to the scene, so then you can like force that dive before 2 or 3 extra people show up.
Yep.
I think it was in one of the G2 Fnatic games they did go for the dive before Herald, and like as they were diving, like the support and the jungler and the mid laner all show up, and it's just very unfortunate because it's just so easy for people to join on these plays, especially if like people are allowed to play teleport mids, which like Akali can theoretically do, and some of these other picks. It's very weird.
Like you can play a Galio and have somewhat of a mobility advantage because you can just push R and get in there.
Right.
But like TF is obviously we're just moving to talk about the patch notes. TF is nerfed probably out of being playable now, and he's been such a big factor for so many of these mid laners because he can move faster than you can around the map.
Yep.
And that's just reality. So is there going to be someone that's going to replace that in terms of mid lane mobility, or is it just going to be more of a laning focused thing? Obviously, Akali got, I believe, she got a bit of a nerf in this patch.
A tiny nerf.
Like, yeah, it's a nerf just on her Q and just mostly on the ratio. So it's going to affect her wave clear more than anything else, I think.
Yeah, that's really what they were aiming for. And it's like trading while wave clearing too, because like Akali's play pattern that let her be successful right now is like is if you can Q, like push the minions and then land the follow-up empowered auto on the enemy champion, and then like shroud your way out. That's like it's really strong actually for like laning in ways that it shouldn't be. So like I don't think it's enough of a nerf. So Akali's still going to be really strong, but like
do you think the Lucian nerf was enough of a nerf to keep him out of mid lane?
It should be. I'm going to say it should be. Will it be? I don't know, because like the big thing is that like it's a good nerf, but what matters with this is like can you still bully people in lane levels 1, 2, 3, and if the answer is yes, then it didn't fix anything, because then you can still get level 2 first, and then you force the enemy laner under tower. And as soon as you've got that kind of advantage, if you have slightly less AD, it doesn't matter. Because like really what the advantage of Lucian is at a pro level isn't as much the kill threat alone as it is the ability to make your opponent lose CS and map presence. So then your jungler can invade and force plays and get a CS advantage by getting double scuttle or some nonsense. So like that's like the big question is it enough to make people not want to pick it? Because I still think levels 1 through 3 it'll bully most of the competitive picks pretty severely. Hopefully it's enough of a nerf so that I don't see it in solo queue, because I'm kind of sick of it. Like it's not a fun experience.
Steven, there were 8 champions that got buffed in patch 10.19. We've talked about half of them already. Of these 8, which do you think is the most likely to see play at Worlds? Ahri, Aphelios, Aurelia, Ivern, Sivir, Silas, Udyr, and Vayne.
Gut says Aphelios. Slightly behind that is Silas.
I'm wondering what world would have to exist for Udyr to be a competitive pick again. Like
UOL, just as a meme.
Well, so I think the thing they tried to do with Udyr was to increase his clear speed enough to make it work, because it was a buff to his R
Phoenix
cone
Saints.
damage.
Yeah,
but
like the problem
when you're not no.
His clear speed has never been the problem. It's the fact that you bear stance one person, and then you switch stances, and then you're like punching them or whatever. And the fact that if you're going for the fast clear speed, you're going Phoenix stance, which is like in many ways, it's like the worst of the level up abilities from a team fighting perspective or from like a team coordination perspective. It's great for clear speed. It's great for split push. It's terrible for like,
everything
team fights,
else.
especially when you're like a jungler. I guess now is a good metaphor in some ways, because at least it's farming junglers. So you're actually expected to get some share of gold from your team. Compared to like, because like in fasting jungler metas where you're supposed to just gank, it's terrible. It's so maybe, but anyway.
What if you put a Yumi on it? What if you put a Yumi on it?
Putting a Yumi on it, I guess
you
that's
still
a
don't want
good
Phoenix stance.
Backup Olaf that actually can be CC.
Aldi brand Olaf.
Do you think there's any chance we see Ivern?
No.
Oh yeah, definitely. Shadow's already played it and looked good on it, which is hilarious because I was not expecting a Lee Sin one trick to also be good at Ivern. That wasn't my expectation, but I think Ivern could show up. Speaking of champions that change how you approach the game and can make things really funny, Ivern's one of them. If Lucian is still good, Ivern Lucian is obnoxious. So just like as another weird thing that can happen in this game where you end up with like a low tank frontline comp with an Ivern that supplies Daisy to be your tank.
Do you think there's any chance we see Ahri?
Ahri?
Only. All right, so I would, rather than vote for Ahri, I'd vote for what really makes Ahri work, as well as some of these other like B tier mid laners, is the Glacial Augment build with GLP into Twin Shadows, and at that point, like if we're talking about mid lane picks, the GLP champion that's seen play in more than one region, unfortunately, has been Zilean. So like, is Ahri better than Zilean? Is kind of going to be that question, and I think the answer is no. Zilean warps the game a lot more. Also, like even with the GLP build, like Ahri's damage isn't quite like steady enough. The only way I'd see Ahri showing up like is no. I still think Zilean's better, because like where you'd want Ahri as far as like a team fight scenario is concerned, rather than like you're like ahead somehow in gold, even though you're going to GLP gold and you're trying to pick people on a side lane, is like if the enemy team is slow and they need to walk at you, and then you can kite them using your ultimate to like drop a lot of damage, and then zone around their front line to get to their tanks. So if like the enemy team's trying to play front to back, you can like Ahri around them theoretically if they don't have, you know, an Ornald and all these other abilities to make that unfortunate. And it's like in a lot of those scenarios, I think Zillion's just a better pick, where like you can just drop double bomb. It still is good zone control, and it's easier to play with. I just think that Zilean is just like more likely than Ahri in a lot of those ways.
Right.
I don't know if there's any like secret Ahri one tricks that we'd have to. Well,
Faker's not there, so no. All right, last thing for the podcast before we're done for the day. What is your one completely out of meta pick that you haven't seen played in a pro game that you think has a shot to be seen at Worlds?
So not being seen in a pro game makes this really hard, because Bwipo ruins me. He's already played the top Rengar. He's played the Urgot. Like, so like a lot of these options fall off. That makes it kind of hard to pick one. Draven's been played. Draven's won games, so that makes it hard to pick an ADC in a lot of ways.
Phase Rush is super buffed, right?
Yep.
Vladimir
bot lane, if that's your like tweak. I don't think it's good enough personally.
With Lucian mid, if Lucian mid's good, and you put Vladimir bottom and with like a AP jungler like Lilia, I guess. Like that's gonna be really reaching back to the back of the fridge.
And it's still a good flex because you could see it top lane.
Yeah.
Gragas is almost meta, so it's like you can't even say Gragas for this, because like Gragas is won games. Let's see. What I go with?
I think the Yasuo bot lane is one that I'm definitely going to have my eye on. I suspect we're going to see that sooner or later.
Yasuo bot seems like a really good bet, because like it's an AD pick, but it like plays well into like a kill lane effectively, and then can like snowball for these mid game fights. That makes a lot of sense. It's surprising how little play it's seen this year as a whole, because like it showed up a lot like last year going into Worlds and what was going on. I don't know, because like it hasn't seen play.
I have my one, and I will go, because I think Showmaker's going to play a Katarina game at Worlds.
Spicy.
Right, that would be spicy.
If you don't know, Showmaker started out as a Katarina one trick. That's a thing. And it's always been his favorite champion, and he never gets to play it in pro because it's terrible in pro. But I think he will try to do the thing that Faker has always tried to do, to get his Ahri skin and try to get his Katarina skin and make it work. So I think we'll see at least one Katarina game out of Showmaker this tournament.
That'd be spicy. If Morgana was better, I'd feel more inclined to believe with you in the meta, but Morgana's kind of weak right now, which is very bizarre, and so like that makes it seem less likely to me.
Because you can't just put a black shield on it,
yeah. Yeah. But you know, maybe they're playing it with top Zilean, right? Because that's the other way you make it work.
What if you play it with a top Kale?
Oh, okay, yeah.
We have seen played in the meta.
Yeah, the Shy's not in this tournament, but like Nuguri plays it sometimes, right?
Nuguri plays it, I'm saying.
Yeah. So maybe I could see it. Shoot, what would I pick? I don't know. We've kind of covered a lot of my like really spice balls.
Is anyone going to play your beloved support Teemo?
Teemo is not going to see the light of day in this tournament. Yeah, that's not a thing that happens. The teams that troll with Teemo aren't here.
I think you would get
that I'm aware
fined at that point for win trading by Riot if you locked in Teemo in any point.
Well, it's happened in LPL games.
It's happened in the LCK as well.
Yeah,
And it's
like
one game in the LCK.
yeah, it happens. It's just like I don't see it at Worlds. Like weren't there. Was it 919 where the anti-buffs were, and I got confused, or did they actually? Yeah, okay, that makes me sad. Could have had my LS shout out, but no. I don't know. Riven seen play? What the hell?
Riven?
Viper played.
Viper.
Yeah, so I don't know if that counts.
That would be spicy, but like, could mid Riven work into some of the meta picks?
Would you count Poppy as being?
I would count Poppy as being out of meta.
Because I could see Poppy, especially as a Camille answer. It's already kind of popular. So like Poppy is one of the champs that I could see like
there you go.
Showing up, especially in these top lane counter matchups with like against Jax or Camille or Jace. Poppy
and
Jace
Nidalee,
is one of those
like,
matchups that is fascinating.
That kind of.
Oh, it's good against Lee Sin, against Nidalee. It's good against Hecarim.
You might have like sniffed something out with that, like legitimate.
Yeah, it has a role.
It's good against Rakan if Rakan ever comes back in the meta. Like if we start seeing Xiye Rakan bot lane.
The main reasons teams haven't already been playing Poppy is because Ornn is too like attractive as a pick a lot of the time. I just want to give my item upgrades. You know, Double Lift over here is screaming that he wants to be able to upgrade, you know, his Blade of the Ruined King.
Also, while the Poppy into Jace matchup is survivable for the Poppy, that's a really unpleasant laning phase. And there are too many good Jace players this tournament. And Brokenblade.
Brokenblade.
Good Jace players and Brokenblade.
And Brokenblade, yeah. He's like he's the carry who's like not in that upper echelon of like power players. So I don't know. There's also a lot of weak side players who could just try playing it. Like Orome loves Jax. He could go for it.
Yep. There's a lot that could go on. By the time we next record, we're going to know a lot more about what's actually happened, which I think is going to help us not go 2.5 hours long, boys.
Doing it.
It's a long podcast. It is a much longer podcast than I like and I'm used to, but we'll do okay. It's the first episode. We had to make it extra special for whoever's actually going to listen to this.
Yeah. Well, and Eric did a whole like breakdown of like.
Eric did a whole thing. Eric was super ready for this, and we were just here for it. Next time we'll have to just bring the memes a little bit stronger.
Yeah, it's something I can speak to other than regions that I don't watch.
Analysis. So this podcast is a part of the Funky Games network of things. We please feel free to check stuff out. I believe we sometimes stream on the Funky Games channel on Twitch. You can track us down on assorted social media items. I believe Steven you can find on Twitter at FNKY Ireland, where the E is a 3. You can find me on Twitter at Prof Cedar. You can't find Eric anywhere. He's invisible.
I am invisible. That's true.
The invisible man.
But if you have questions or comments about anything, feel free to shoot them our way. We'll do better the next time. We don't have a consistent recording schedule yet, but we might get on that later. So we'll see how it goes. Please hit us up with your feedback. And if you stuck around for the entire 2.5 hours, you are a saint. God bless you. And that's been it. So from Steven and Eric, I'm David. This has been the Reaction Time Podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.